Okay, so I have my pegboard base and now we are going to make some pegs. So the first thing I always like to do is make sure it's pretty much the way I want it, and I'm just going to sort of scooch my base back a little bit. I'm going to get a cylinder that is a primitive, and I'm not gonna place it yet because I'm gonna make my radius be 0.5, so that means the diameter is gonna be an inch. And I'm gonna make it a 4-inch high peg, and we're gonna see how that looks. So if I go to my front view, you can see it's gonna come up slightly over this, which is what I want, because, whoops, I need to click on move to be able to move him around. Basically what it boils down to is I want to be able to pound this almost flat. If I really wanted it flat, I'd make it 3.5, which I can do by editing this. So if I click on it, I should be able to go to Smart Scale and then double click there and edit this and make it a 3.5. See if that does it. Oh, almost. Let's, whoops, and again, move, not just drag. So now it fits inside. So it'll pound all the way down, but it can fall out, so I don't like that. So let's go back and edit this guy again with the smart scale. So instead of 3.5, I'm going to go with 3.75, which is slightly larger, but not by much. And then I should be able to go to move. And scooch him. Yep, see, now it matches. So we're going to go with 3.75, and now you see I've got my peg, and I'm just going to drag it over there. I'm going to click on it and do a control copy and a control paste from the keyboard because I want my hole to be exactly the same as my peg. So I'm just going to make a copy of the peg itself. I'm just using pan to move this around. And I'm going to put my hole somewhere on here. I can go through and try and measure and do the alignment tool again if I really want to, that's fine, to make everything perfect. But for this activity, I just want you to get the idea of how to do some of these things. So we're going to come to halfway between the top and the front, so you can see that's there. And I'm going to go do a subtraction. I'm going to click the board first and then the peg and hit enter. And it cuts away a hole that's exactly perfectly the size of my peg. Okay, so now we're going to try some other ways to make pegs. So that was with a primitive. We're actually going to try now drawing. And one of the ways I could draw with a regular polyline, but I kind of like the spline and the way the spline ends up looking. So I'm going to go to my top view so I can see my grid. And I'm actually going to zoom in down here and go select my spline tool. And I'm just going to draw a shape. So it draws a straight line, but now it curves. And then I can bring it back. So now I get this sort of boomerangy shape, which honestly is fine. All I'm looking for is some sort of spline shape. So let's see here. Let's see if we can't. Well, obviously not. Let's go home. There we go. I like to extrude from home so I can see it actually come up so I know it's right. So I'm going to extrude this guy up the same distance we did the cylinder, which was 3.75. Now that I have that, again, I can move it over here. Notice my drawing, my sketch is still there. I can just highlight it and delete it. I'm going to select on my peg, copy it, paste it. And again, I'm going to drag it over here. We're going to go back here so I can get it inside there. And I want to actually see where it is in relative to the round one that I did there. So I don't want to be too close to an edge. I want to have some space. I could scale this up if I wanted to make it a little bigger, but then I'd have to go back and change the peg itself. So whenever I make a change to the peg, I have to then delete the hole and go back and recreate the hole. But I think that's actually a pretty good placement. And again, I'm just going to come back over here. I'm going to go to combine, subtract, board first, then the peg itself, and enter. And now it has cut away 2 pegs. So as you can see, there they are. They're nice little holes. Now, there's a couple of other features that we can use that we've talked a little bit about, but not a ton. I'm going to use pan here to move around. And I'm going to go zoom in. And I'm going to create a sketch, but this time I'm going to use a polygon. And I'm going to start here, and I'm going to make, this is starting with a 6-sided polygon. So I'm going to make it, whoops, oh, that was the wrong thing. So let's tab an 8-sided polygon, and we'll make it, radius of 1 inch is kind of huge. So let's make it a 0.5. There we go. So now I kind of have it where I want it. I can spin it. It's going to give me 8 sides, and I'm going to click somewhere. To be done with it, escape to get out of the tool. Go back to home, and as you can see, I can now click here and extrude this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to scale that up slightly. I'm going to scale it up by a factor of 1.5 and see if that works. Whoops. Yes, I want uniform. Okay. Won't do it. Okay, or not. Okay, so there's this, and if I want to scale it, I found I really like the smart scale better than any of the other scale options. So if I come down here, and usually it works best if I'm on the top view, I can come down and then select smart scale. Usually I can then mess with my scale options. Actually, you know what? I kind of like the size that it is right there. So I think I'm going to be done. So I'll go to home and extrude it up and 3.75. Enter. I'm going to move that out of the way. I'm going to copy and paste it. Grab the center and pull it over here so it's closer. I'm going to highlight my drawing and delete it so it's not there anymore just because I don't like it. It bugs me. And I'm going to go back up here to move, which is also a Control T on your keyboard for the shortcut. Sometimes I like the shortcuts and sometimes they bug me. So it kind of just depends on who is doing it and what you like. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract that again. Subtract, board, then that, enter. And now I have 3 holes and we're going to do 1 more. So let's try one with an intersect, just so you can see how that's done. So to do an intersect, I'm going to pull 2 primitives that I can sort of combine together. So I'm going to pull a box and I'm going to make it a 1 by 1 by 3.75 box, and I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab a cylinder, and I'm going to make my cylinder 0.5. Yeah. Notice 0.5 is not going to be very big. Let's go ahead and make it like a 1. Okay, so that's bigger. And then we'll make the height 3.75, and I'm just going to place it anywhere. I'm going to go to my top, and then I'm going to move my cylinder so that it cuts away part of my square here. I kind of like the idea of going through a corner like that. So I kind of like that. Let's go to the home view and see what it looks like. So it's a little funky looking, but that's okay. So I'm going to hit enter to leave it. Now there's a couple of things I can do. I can do, under combine, I can merge 2 things together to make them one thing. I can subtract something, I can intersect something. So intersecting is interesting, so it only gives you the intersect. So it would only give me that right there. And that's not really all that interesting, so that's not what I want. What I really want is to cut this away. So I'm going to go ahead and do a subtract, which is right here. I'm going to click the original, what I want to take out, enter, and there we go. So now, when I go to my home view, you can see there he is. I'm going to move him over here. I'm going to do a control paste, drag him over, and in my home view, or I'm sorry, on my top view, I'm going to go ahead and move this. Okay, so I'm going to move this guy in, kind of put him generally where I want him. Hit home, and now hit enter to save that. And again, I'm going to go in and subtract from the board this shape, enter. So now you get the idea. There's my home view, or my top view. Now I'm going to move all my pegs so they're fairly close, but not actually on top of the board. And the reason is that when I go to do this as a 3D print, I want to print the pegs at the same time I print the board. I could make them all as separate pieces, and in fact they have a feature for that. So if I were to click on one of my pegs, I could export that selection and make it its own STL file, and then I could place it anywhere I wanted to on my thing. I just figured for student purposes this is a little bit easier, so I just moved them to make sure that they were not, so I'm just making sure they're not actually touching the board in any way. Ooh, how close? No, that's got some distance. I'm all right. So I'm just kind of scrolling around it and using my view cube to make sure. So now that I'm sure it's what I want, I'm going to go over here to the Autodesk 123D Design window, or little selector. I'm going to go to Save a Copy to my computer. And I'm going to name this Maya's Pegboard Toy. And save it to my U drive. And then I'm going to do one more thing because I want to be able to print this in 3D. So I'm going to come down here to Export as 3D STL. I'm going to use a medium mesh, and I'm going to combine all the objects so they all show up as one STL. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to call this Maya's Pegboard Final, and I'm going to hit STL. Correct. So I'm going to save it, and now I'll show you what that looks like in Cura here in a second. But this is now ready to be 3D printed.